everyone, and welcome to another edition of PSN News in My Humble Opinion. I'm Michelle Wolf. Joining me tonight are Gabby Richards from College Democrats and Ryan Appel from College Republicans. Tonight, our subject is a little morbid. Can the government decide who dies? Death has been in the forefront of the news a lot recently. Brittany Maynard was a young, terminally ill woman who chose to end her own life less than 2 weeks ago under Oregon's Death with Dignity law. This has sparked controversy across the country, some praising Maynard for her decision, others criticizing. This also brings into question the death penalty, where hardened criminals are given lethal injections. So again, we ask, can the government decide who can live and who dies? What do you guys think?
There's 3 tiers that come with why the death penalty should not be a applicable punishment in our justice system. One being the imperfections and the imperfectness of our justice system and our legal system. There is no unequivocal way that we can simply say that yes, the crimes that you have committed are warranted of death. And moreover, aside from that, is the racial biases that come along with the death penalty that are very well documented to the point of juries, judges who are determining the lives of these people who are on trial. It's one of those issues where we as people, we as lawyers, we as lawmakers, we as judges and jurors should not be the ones determining whether or not someone's actions are deserving enough of us to kill them.
For the most part, I agree. I think that the death penalty should be abolished because it is administered unfairly, in my opinion. You see a lot of minorities get it for reasons because of, they might not be able to afford, a good defense attorney. Whereas, some people who may be well off may be able to afford, better attorney, get better deals in their wherever they plead. So I think that based on whether it's a minority or just the fact that a lot of decisions made in our justice system are never black and white, you see a lot of surprising cases like Casey Anthony, O.J. Simpson, things like that, where everyone's expecting one thing, and the turnout's the other thing. And another thing is, I don't think that it's the government's job to decide who lives or dies. I think that should remain a national defense priority. Military, law enforcement, those things are necessary. But I think if you're able to have a justice system that's able to keep those people out of the public in the prison system, I don't think they're any more of a threat than if they were dead.
So everyone has a right to live?
Yes.
I think so.
Okay, and what about the death with dignity laws? Can a terminally ill person decide their own fate?
If it is up to you, again, this goes back with whether or not we believe that committing suicide is a crime. Because for so long, we have, had this idea placed around, people committing suicide, taking their own life. And that is, very different than someone who is terminally ill, taking their life with the dignity clause that exists in the Brittany Maynard case. And I think we touch upon this very sensitive subject when we discuss whether or not someone should determine whether or not that they themselves should die. Because, who are we to tell you, if you believe that the best course of action in this moment, whether or not you are suffering from a mental disease, whether or not you are suffering from something that is, for instance, terminally ill patients, for us to determine whether or not you're able to live or you're able to die, and if you feel as though you have exhausted yourself when it comes to medicine or any treatment that the medical system is able to give you, we, in the same sense, should not be able to tell you that you shouldn't be able to die with dignity if you are, suffering medically. And even more importantly, I think that the lack of focus that we have put on mental health patients this, aura and this, idea that if you are suffering from depression or if you are bipolar, that you're cast off in society, and it's almost as if there is this stereotype associated with the disease, that we have then shifted our focus from treating mentally ill people into prosecuting them through the justice system in ways that we have either fixated ourselves or ones that we have found just trying to convict them of something so that we can get them off the streets as opposed to helping them. And that is when we see, the spike in suicide, the spike in accidental death. And for us to determine whether or not people like that are able to live and people like Brittany Maynard are able to live, in my opinion, is no different than us determining whether or not that the government or the justice system should be able to take the life of someone.
Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Sure. I think when it comes to mental health, they're doing different studies all the time. They find new things about, what people are thinking when they're, when they have a certain mental illness, what their thought processes are like. But I think that it's really, it's a big gray area because in my opinion, I don't think that suicide, whether it's the way Brittany Maynard went, or just some depressed teenager who decides that he's gonna take his own life one day. I think there's you should focus on, like you said, every exhaustible option that you can to prevent them from taking that route, because I feel like suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Obviously, something such as depression can be improved upon, but if you're terminally ill and you're going to die, I think in certain instances, the person may or may not be able to be allowed to take their own life. Like if they're supposed to die, but they're not like in agonizing pain. I know some people are in like agonizing pain, they can't take it anymore. I think that it would be a little inhumane to watch them suffer, in a hospital. If they're in agonizing pain, they're going to die. I think at least, the very least you should do is, make them comfortable until their time comes. But a lot of times, if it's not physical, I don't think that you should have the right to end your own life if it's something that can be treated by a psychiatrist or anything that can help you mentally. But when it comes to physical pain, I think that's a whole other thing that in some cases can be, accepted.
What about the parents of Scotty McMillan, the 3-year-old who was beaten to death by his mother and his mother's boyfriend? What kind of punishment do they deserve for that?
I think that something as crazy as that, for a mother and her boyfriend to do something as brutal and just obscene as what they did, I think that this, along with thousands of other cases, I think the punishment of losing your rights, like being in confinement for the rest of your life, is probably a lot more of a punishment than putting them to death, because a lot of these types of people who do these absurd things to other people, I don't think they have any regard for anyone's life, even themselves. Obviously, that's a generalization, but I feel like it would be pretty accurate that if they were left in prison for the rest of their lives to think about what they did, whether they're mentally unstable or not, I think that would be way more of a punishment, that it would be a lot harder to deal with than knowing that, all right, I'm going to be put to death. I don't have to deal with this anymore.
My view on this case is, unfortunately, while what they did was completely heinous and absurd and should have never happened, and this poor kid died because of the negligence of his parents, these people are not going to be granted a fair trial, specifically because of the media coverage associated with this terrible act. And what will happen now is, obviously, there are prosecutors who are pursuing the death penalty, and the jury will most likely convict them because of the media coverage surrounding. You will not find someone who has not at least heard a bleep of what has happened in this case. You will not find a judge in an area, at least before it goes out of the district, that has not heard about this case. So for them to receive a fair trial, which every criminal, I believe, whether you are innocent, whether you are guilty, deserves, it's not going to happen. So the option of them, getting the death penalty, being in a capital trial, is highly likely, and the chances of them actually receiving the death penalty is also very, very likely. And that is also an issue that is associated with a lot of other cases that then go to, capital punishment cases, is that if you have a high profile crime, it is very, very hard to find a juror who, especially in this day and age with Facebook, with Twitter, that has not heard about the case, especially if it's mainstream. So for you to then be awarded a fair trial, to have a jury that is completely impartial to the case, who will actually listen to the evidence presented by the defendants, by the defense and the prosecution, it's unlikely. It's almost, unfortunately, that is one of the biggest issues with our justice system, is that there's a bias in our justice system, specifically when it comes to, racial discrimination, when it comes to these types of cases, that it is almost unavoidable to find a juror who is completely impartial and has not heard anything about the case. And for this instance with, the McMillan trial, is that what they did is terrible. They deserve to rot in prison. But I do not believe that killing them will, one, justify the death of a child or be warranted in this matter, specifically because how are we any better if we're killing someone? And that's a whole moral debate that, honestly, with the imperfections of our justice system that we shouldn't even go into. But in this case, they most likely will be tried for the death penalty, and they most likely will be convicted, and then they will sit on death row for God knows how many years because of the appeal process. And, we will sit here and we will wait, and justice will not be served.
Do you think that the death penalty scares people into not committing a crime?
No. I think that the issues with capital punishment specifically is that you can be tried for capital punishment, and then you can keep appealing, and you can keep appealing, and you can keep appealing, to the point where, of the 8,000 people that have been sentenced to death row over the past, since the death penalty was reinstated in 1976, I believe, only 1,300 of them have actually been executed due to the appeal process. So this issue of possibly being sentenced to death, I believe, is not a deterrent when it comes to people wanting to commit homicide or wanting to commit heinous crimes, specifically like the McMillan family that we just talked about.
I agree. I think not even the death penalty would be a deterrent as much as just going to prison. For certain crimes, people obviously, they don't want to go to prison for just theft, drugs. They're trying to. A lot of them are, in poverty. They're committing these crimes to try to make their lives better, maybe. Or maybe just because they feel like stealing something or doing some kind of drugs. But I don't think that those type of people want to go to prison. And while prison may be deterrent for them, they don't want to go, they still do it. They might have no other option. But I think for people that are like serial killers, like just the absurd things that you see, like rapists, all these people who like home invaders, people who torture people. I don't think they have. I think prison is not even in their minds. I don't think they care. I think what they're doing is either A, because they're mentally unstable, they're mentally ill, or they don't care if they're going to prison. They want to do this for any number of reasons, revenge, money. They're willing to take that punishment. So I don't think that capital punishment or even prison for these kinds of people is even any kind of deterrent.
Okay. Do you have anything you'd like to add? Any last statements?
I think that when we continue to discuss the death penalty, when we continue to develop our own opinions about the death penalty, before we believe that someone outright deserves to die for something that they committed, that we need to look at the imperfections of our justice system. The fact that of the 1,300 people that have died due to capital punishment, 517 of them have been convicted in Texas. If that doesn't shout issues with our justice system and biases that exist within our justice system, I don't know what does.